Tony was out there. And we had a lot of other people who went different directions. But I encourage you to stick around. And tonight's our potluck in the back. And I'm sure you'll sit with some brethren who are out and about and hear some unique situations, some very blessed situations. So God be the glory for this opportunity that we had today and the lives that were touched. Another blessing I want to share is Keely Hargrove. Around, she wanted to be recognized as serving here underneath the eldership here at Cave Springs, and she's a very, very special girl. And if you hadn't had a chance to get to know Keely, please take some time to get to know her and get to see the joy she brings. So Keely, very excited to be here serving with you. One thing I forgot to mention this morning is that there will be no ladies class tomorrow. Didn't have it last Monday, and you won't have it again tomorrow. So please take note of that. But Steve, do you have an announcement?
I had one announcement. I'm going to go ahead and do an intro now so I don't have to do it later. With the Bear Valley guys here, when I talked to Wayne Berger, who's the instructor at Bear Valley, who is in charge of the campaigns, they don't normally do a campaign in the spring. When Travis and I were in school, I think maybe when Tyler was in school too, they still did 2 campaigns a year, one in the fall and one in the spring, and they were required to do 2, and they're only doing 1 each year now. And so when I called to ask could we do one in the spring, Wayne said, well, I'll ask and see if there's some volunteers that want to go. And when he called me back, he said, I've got enough volunteers to maybe do 2 campaigns. And so it says a lot about the students and their willingness to go and serve. But one of those students that is with us, Tyler King, he works with the Bear Valley, with the school. He is... there's an official, is there a title? What's that? Admissions, okay. In other words, he is trying to convince as many men as he possibly can to get themselves to Bear Valley and train. And I see Tyler at different functions and youth rallies and things like that all over the country. And there are several of us here who know Tyler very well. And we're blessed to have him here with us. Wayne Berger asked me, he said, do you want us to do some kind of a report about the school? We get reports from Wes Autry about what's going on in Cambodia, and we get reports from various others that are involved with Bear Valley Works, but not always just about Bear Valley itself and what's going on in Denver and even around the world in various places. And so Tyler tonight is going to share some of that information with us. If you look in the bulletin, you see the number of people connected with Bear Valley that we physically support financially. And it is such a tremendous work, the impact around the world. And to be able to have this group of students here is a blessing, and we're to be a part of the work in more than one way, more than just giving money. But it's great to have these guys here with us and seeing their service, seeing their zeal, and I look forward to hearing the message that Tyler has for us here in just a little bit as well.
Number 590. Number 590.
Oh, worship the King, all glorious above, and gratefully sing His wonderful love. Our shield and defender, the ancient
song before the prayer and before the lesson will be number 780. Number 780. Let's all stand for the song and remain standing for the prayer after. Number 780.
We praise thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus who died and is now gone above. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. We praise thee, O God, for thy Spirit of life, who has shown us our Savior and scattered our night. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. All glory and praise to the Lamb that was slain, who has borne all our sins and has cleansed every stain. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again.
Station will be number 453. Number 453.
Good evening. It is most certainly a blessing to be here tonight. I have heard a ton about Cave Springs, and I think that speaks volumes to who you guys are. Paul would often write in the letters that he was addressing the different churches around kind of Asia Minor area. He would often write, I've heard of your faith, I've heard of your love. And I can similarly say, I've heard of your faith and I've heard of your love. The amount of generosity, the amount of support that you give various works. Roger kind of bumped me before services started this morning, and he showed me the inside of the bulletin and all the different works that you guys are involved in. I'd be hard-pressed to find another congregation that is so generous and so willing and able to help out with works across the country. I'm Tyler King, and I'm from Denver, Colorado. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and so I'll kind of give you a little bit about myself. When I moved to Tennessee in 2017 to work as a youth minister intern, there were some different things that I had to kind of redirect culturally. For example, if I wanted to connect with some teenagers in Colorado, we could talk about skiing or snowboarding or skateboarding or hiking or fishing or camping. However, things kind of changed when I went to Tennessee and there weren't mountains, especially in West Tennessee. And so I would ask teens what they did on their weekend. One teen responded to me and he said, well, I was trying to get my John Deere tractor stuck out of the hauler this past weekend, and it took me about 6 hours. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world do I translate that or relate to that, or how do I find some common ground with that? And then teens would go on to talk to me about livestock and agriculture, and agriculture is huge out in West Tennessee. And so I had all these different stories of chickens and cows and things like that, and again, I'm a mountain kid. I'm a mountain boy. I have no clue what agriculture is. And so one teen in particular started telling me the power and the strength of Belgian draft horses and how one Belgian draft horse can pull up to 8,000 pounds. And that just blew my mind. And then he started to talk about when you paired these two horses together, and I forget the exact number, so I went back online, and sure enough, he was telling me the truth. 2 Belgian draft horses together, if they're strangers to each other, can pull up to 24,000 pounds. So not even just double the weight, but up to 3 times the weight, only using double the source. And then if you find 2 draft horses that have been raised together, you can bring them together, and they can pull up to 32,000 pounds in weight. So this idea of synergy just blew my mind, this ability of these 2 horses. To me, being raised in Colorado, when you talk horsepower, I think Mustangs and Ford Raptors and things of that nature. I don't think horses at first. But this idea of synergy just completely captured my mind. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I found the same principle within Scripture. So if you start in Genesis, you start to see this idea of synergy. Even the word Elohim is the word for God, but in the plural form. So we is what God is kind of addressing at that point. But then you can even go into Genesis chapter 11 and see man start to discover this idea of synergy and this idea of working together. So in Genesis chapter 11, we often have the Vacation Bible School story of the Tower of Babel. And sometimes in our adult life, we just curb it as a Vacation Bible School study, and it just kind of stays there. But I want to show you a couple things in Genesis chapter 11. Number one, within Genesis chapter 11, we see that man recognized that synergy is powerful. So number one, synergy is powerful overall. But man was able to recognize that synergy was powerful. Notice what man says in verse 4. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed." Let us build ourselves, make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. So number one, man recognized that when they were able to work together, when they were able to put their mind toward one thing, they were able to accomplish much more than if they just split off into groups and different parties, or even if they tried to do it single-handedly. Along with synergy is powerful, not only did man recognize it, but God too recognized that synergy was powerful. If you keep on reading in verse 6, it says, "And the Lord said, Behold, they are one people. They have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language." So you see that synergy is powerful not only because man recognizes that synergy is powerful, but because God recognized that synergy was powerful. This idea that God was even able to see these people working together, and therefore it caused him to react and to act upon this to confuse their language, is an indicator for us to say, maybe this whole idea of working together is really something that proves to be an effective source of accomplishing different tasks. Number two, though, I believe that synergy is triumphant. When we kind of fast forward in Scripture and fast forward in the chronological timeline, far beyond what we consider the halfway point, we look at the book of Nehemiah. The story unfolds of Nehemiah, and the ruler Artaxerxes kind of commands Nehemiah to go up and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. So this is coming kind of post-exilic. And so the Jews are just coming out of Babylonian captivity, and because of that, their city, Jerusalem, needs to be rebuilt. Well, what's one of the most mandatory things that you need for a city? A wall. You need some sort of way of defense, and in some great degree, a wall offers offense as well, too. But when you look at Nehemiah, you see this biblical principle of synergy being used again. Look at chapter 3, and I just want you to kind of glimpse over chapter 3 and see all the different times that the writer notices or writes down next to him. You can start in verse 2. Next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri, built. And then look at verse 3. You can kind of see this thread of next to them, they built. It was not this idea of just one leader kind of just micromanaging everything, but it was this idea of them holding together and building together. When you fast forward to chapter 4, you see kind of the antagonists of Nehemiah's story, right? You've got Sanballat and Tobiah. and they're kind of mocking these people. They're kind of poking fun, saying that even if a fox were to run up on a wall, it would fall down. And they're doing all these things, and it even convinced some of the people to say, we can't do this. Look at chapter 4 and verse 10. They said, we by ourselves, we can't do this. And then Nehemiah would remind them of the Lord, their God, and how he is great and how he is awesome. And that together that they could do this. So you see, that was one of the first indications of a great leader, was to kind of be with the people, not separate from the people, but to be together. This idea of unity and synergy would bring the people together. In fact, the odds were completely stacked against Israel. When you've got all these surrounding cities, these Israelites who are banged up and bruised up from the previous Babylonian captivity, they're coming out and they're able to do what seems like the impossible. They're able to beat the odds. There are several odds and several statistics within the church that we find today. One of the statistics that I heard growing up was 1 in 3 people will fall away from the church when you're a teenager. So as you're a teenager, you can look around you, and if there's a teen row or something like that, you can look to the person to your right and to your left, and odds are one of those people will fall away from the faith. You see, the odds are against the church when we look at the entirety of the picture. But when we take into consideration the idea of synergy, we can beat those odds, especially when we recognize that our God is with us. When we bring him into the equation, not only can we accomplish great things by ourselves when we're together, but if we take God Almighty, the creator of all things, and bring him in with us, then we could accomplish great things. But not only is synergy triumphant and victorious, because eventually Nehemiah and his people did rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and it was a great and mighty wall. That triumph is something that is also godly. And when we fast forward into the New Testament side of things, we can look at passages like 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 12 and see that there is one body, but there are many parts of this body. This idea of synergy, again, reappears even in the New Testament. Now, what's interesting to me is the Jews kind of had a misconception or a presupposition as far as what a kingdom would be. And so when you look at things, I'm really glad that Steve has kind of worked through intertestamental periods, but when you look at things like the Maccabean revolt with Antiochus Epiphanes, and he's just laying waste to these Jews and Israelites, and when you see the temple completely defiled and all these things, all these negative things happening to the Jews, when they hear that a kingdom is coming with a king, they're thinking in a physical manner. They're thinking, man, this will be awesome to have a mighty king who will rule over all the earth. And then who do they get? They get Jesus, who was born of Mary, right? And then along with that, then he collects these 12 apostles, and people are still kind of building this anticipation. Okay, this is the king. This is who they say he is. And then they see their king hanging on the cross. And many people probably turn to doubt. This can't be our king. This can't be the king of the Jews because he's up there. But what did Christ establish? He established his kingdom. And we see that through all the Gospels. And then we see the kingdom come into fruition in Acts chapter 2 at Pentecost, and how Peter was able to unlock the doors to the kingdom. And from there, the kingdom just kind of lit like wildfire. And then this is so amazing to me because God recognized that these people, they can't do this alone. I need to establish a kingdom for them. And so God gave us. He gave us each other so that we could have this idea of synergy and working together. And that's what's really neat to me, is synergy is a godly principle. We see it all the way in Genesis chapter 1 when God created the earth. He used the Godhead in that manner. You see the Spirit hovering over the waters. According to John chapter 1, we see that Christ was involved in the creation as well as Colossians chapter 1. And then we see God the Father ultimately being involved in that creation too. God was using this idea of synergy in creation. So synergy is not only powerful, according to Genesis 11, it is also triumphant in Nehemiah chapter 4, and it is also godly in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 12. And so what I want to kind of show you guys is some of the statistics or some of the updates that we have with Bear Valley. Let's see if the PowerPoint will work. That's okay. We will go ahead and move on. So what you guys are doing with Bear Valley is absolutely wonderful. And I don't just mean your financial support, I mean your prayerful support. I know there are many people in this congregation who are prayerful about the work that's happening at Bear Valley. And it means a great deal to us. Now, I consider myself blessed to be working at such a great institution primarily because I get to see God's providence happen on a regular basis. A lot of people kind of question, what is God's providence all about? How does God work? But when you're able to witness it happen in people's lives almost on an everyday basis, I really don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The way that things work, the way that things fall into place, students will come up to me and they'll say, man, you wouldn't believe what just happened. And I'll say, well, I can probably try and believe because it's happened several times in the past. All these great stories that are coming to fruition from Bear Valley. But I want you to know that it's because of you guys that things like Bear Valley work. It's this idea of synergy and working together. If it wasn't for the Cave Springs Church of Christ, I guarantee you, I promise you, that Bear Valley would not be doing what it's doing today because of your prayerful and financial support. So one of the things that I want to show you or want to tell you about with Bear Valley is some new additions. So we have schools internationally in 24 different countries, and within the next 3 months, the numbers will change, but we're in 24 different countries, which results in 37 different schools across the world. And I'll show you a map here in a second, but that includes over a population of 800 students in current enrollment. So people always ask, how many students are at Bear Valley? Well, at the Denver campus, we have a little over 40 full-time students. And then that's not including the part-time students. Worldwide, we've got over 800 full-time students in different countries and different continents. We also have included to make a study abroad program. So this man is named Caleb Cutter, and he's from California. And our study abroad program basically consists of, if you are a senior, and if your grades are up to par where they need to be, you have the option to spend the last quarter of your senior year at one of our remote extension schools. And so Caleb chose the school in Fiji. Now you're probably thinking, wow, he really had to sweat over that option. But Fiji is still certainly a mission area. It's still a place where souls are located, and so we saw fit to put a school there. And the school is very successful over there. So Caleb will spend, he actually left on Saturday, so he'll spend the next 2 months over in Fiji taking the remainder of his classes there. They have an English-speaking stream, so that's kind of one of the things that we're working on. This is kind of a dual purpose. Paul talks about a mutual encouragement in Romans chapter 1, and I believe this to be a similar case where Caleb will hopefully be encouraged to maybe do mission work sometime in the future, and it would kind of get his feet wet in the idea of mission work. But not only that, but I'm sure too the people over in Fiji, they'll get to experience what it's like to have an American over there. And Caleb will certainly bless their lives as he is a great student and full of knowledge and full of character and charisma. I also want to show you some of the different classes that have come in. You might recognize 2 of those people, and there are also some of the people here on campaign. So we've got Tony and Carrie here on campaign with us, as well as Devin and Lindsay. So you see kind of where we're at. This was our January class, 11 full-time students. And then this past August, we had 18 full-time students enroll with a total, when you include family and part-time students, of over 35. So you take those 2 classes combined, and that's 1 year's worth of classes. That's kind of some of the numbers that we've had here recently. What's really neat is I remember when I was in school, it wasn't even that long ago, in 2015 is when I started, there were plenty of seats open and available. If someone wanted to come and audit a class, they could. It was no big deal. I had 2 seats typically open right next to me. I don't know if I smelt bad, but usually there were some spots open. Now is the case where we're having to take chairs from the library, bring them downstairs, pull tables out of closets. The classrooms are packed at this point. So it's very encouraging to see some of the numbers that are coming from Bear Valley. Not only that, but we have a new program which John and Carla Moore have blessed us with, and that is the Israel trips. You might have seen pictures of these different trips, but it does qualify you for some master's credits, so from a student standpoint, it's a good idea at that regard, but it's also open to kind of public. Steve was mentioning that he will be on one of these trips sometime in the future. So John and Carla Moore, kind of their professional level, their expertise, if you will, is the Bible lands. John has done several trips over to the Bible Lands, and so I know personally I always wanted to go to the Bible Lands, but I didn't want to go with some denominational preacher or teacher, and I didn't want to be fed something that I didn't necessarily agree with. So this is a perfect opportunity to be filled with knowledge and experience some of the different sites that you see. So going to like Caesarea Maritima, where Paul was standing on the beach as he was about to go to Rome. It's a very surreal feeling. Floating on the Dead Sea as we take a boat ride kind of around the Sea of Galilee. Very surreal feeling knowing that this is the location that Christ walked on. Climbing up Mount Carmel and realizing this is where Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal and where fire came raining down from heaven and landed. And it's cool to see because there's cities all below the summit of this mountain, and it would have been a sight to see. So some of these things kind of start to come to life. So Bear Valley is now involved in that as well. But I kind of want to bring things to a real level and to kind of encourage you as far as what you're doing to support the kingdom. So if you take, just on average, and this is a fairly modest number, if you take 15 graduates per year, and if those 15 graduates go out and work in full-time ministry somewhere, perhaps maybe at a congregation of 50, and again, we're kind of talking somewhat modest numbers if we're just making all of them. Some of them will go to congregations larger, some will go to smaller congregations. But just 15 graduates at 50 member congregations, you're looking at a number of 750 souls that are being ministered to that otherwise would not be ministered to. And that's per year. That's every graduation. So every year you've got 750 at a modest number of souls that are being ministered to. But not just that, but it's happening worldwide as we have over 800 students enrolled in a full-time preaching program or Bible program. Again, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, but it's partly because I see God working in a synergetic way with his church. And I see that because of congregations like Cave Springs. I see that because of various congregations around the nation that help support the work at Bear Valley. But I want to encourage you and hopefully leave you with a bit of kind of optimism as far as you may be hearing numbers that the church is dying. You may be seeing statistics that the church is dying. You may be seeing tons and tons and tons of open pulpits and saying, oh, this church closed their doors, or this church closed their doors, or our numbers are dwindling. But at least take comfort in knowing that you are helping provide support in a spiritual and financial manner to Bear Valley that will hopefully continue to bless God's kingdom. And it's incredible to see how God is working through the lives of various individuals around the globe. Tonight we've talked a lot about synergy from a couple different standpoints. From the book of Genesis, we can see that synergy is powerful. You can see it all throughout Genesis. From the book of Nehemiah, you see that synergy is triumphant. Whenever you bring people together and unite them with a mind to work, like Nehemiah would say, with one mind, you see that synergy is triumphant. It's going to win. And then you look at passages like 1 Corinthians 12, and you realize that synergy is godly, that synergy is something that is from God, and it is a God-designed plan. But I want you to know, too, that you will encounter struggles. And me being remotely over in Denver, Colorado, I don't know all of you on a personal level, and I wish I did. But even if I did, I don't know all your struggles. I don't know all the different ways that you're hurting. I don't know all the different ways that you need help. But I do know one thing for a fact, that if you do need help, that it is far better, and I can tell you from a personal standpoint, it is far better when you reach out and you have those around you to help you, and especially when you bring God into the equation. And so this idea of synergy just might save your soul. This idea of synergy can boost you and bring you up to a point where you would like to be. This idea of synergy is something that will not only change the world, but change eternity as well. The invitation has kind of been open and left for you. And if you see that you have a need and feel that you have a need, I would encourage you to let it be known as together we stand and sing.
So glad and free.
that prepared. You'll come down, we'll sing the first verse of number 100. You just heard. Number 100. When we meet in sweet communion, where the feast divine is spread, hearts are brought in closer union, while partaking of the bread. Precious peace, all else surpassing, wondrous love for you and me. While we teach Christ gently whispers, do this in my memory.
Our Father who art in heaven, we come to thee once again this day. Thank you for all the many blessings you send our way. Father, now we ask that you do these that are going to partake of this bread. They remember that it was Jesus who gave his body upon that cross, that their sins might be forgiven. And as they eat of this bread, let them remember the sacrifice that God was so willing to give when he gave his one and only Son on our behalf. And in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Father, again, we gather around this table, remembering it is your Son's death on the cross. Father, the blood that he shed, and the forgiveness that we have, the reason that we're here today. Father, we pray that you'll be with those who are partaking of this fruit of the vine. Father, that their mind will go back to that cross and the blood that was shed on their behalf. Father, we pray that you will bless us this evening as we commune with them. It's in your Son's name we pray.
It has been a great day, and we're not done yet. I hope everybody is able to stay and to be a part of the fellowship as we share a potluck tonight. If you are, we've only knocked doors for about 2 hours this afternoon, and I told you there would be stories. There always are. And as soon as people started walking in, I started hearing the stories of the encounters with people, and that's one of the fun parts of campaigns. And if you've ever stood at the door of someone with an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the person on the other side of the door is trying to explain why they're an atheist and why asking God a question would be no different than asking a fairy tale a question, and to have little ones there with you hearing that, that's a valuable, teachable moment for us to be able to discuss that with them, for us to be able to get them to see the different views and things. Some people would be afraid of having their children hear something like that. That's the world we live in. That's the world they're gonna find themselves in. And so to be able to be around people who are able to help them understand where people are, that was one experience that I had today. And there are so many others, and I'm sure you're going to hear them when we're back here sitting down together and eating tonight. And if you will come each evening, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we're going to be eating. And again, if you haven't signed up to bring any food, write your name on the list in the foyer, and come and bring some food, but come and just be a part of there's a synergy. There's an energy because of the work. And when you come in from walking the streets, there's just a sense of, I know that today I did God's will. I know today I have done what He has called me to do. And it's a great experience. And so come and be a part of that with us, or come knock doors with us. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we will meet back in the Family Center, and we will divvy out assignments again for neighborhoods to go out and to talk to people in our community. And so at 9 o'clock, or probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, after lunch, we'll be going back out again. So we've got 3 full days ahead of us. I did want to make one request. I saw that there's a potential, I think on Tuesday, of some rain. I want to make a request. If you have big umbrellas, the golf size umbrellas, if you have any of those or one of those, would you be willing to bring those up here to the church building for us to use if and when it rains? Because that's not going to stop us from going out. We'll go knock doors in the rain, but it would be nice to stay dry as much as possible. So if you have something like that, we would love to be able to use that. So I think that's all I've got. Robert's going to lead us in one more song, and we'll be led in a closing prayer. So if you'll be standing. Yes, sir. Okay.
Tyler is a very modest young man, as you could well see. He has talents other than just being involved in bringing in students to Bear Valley, etc. He is also an accomplished welder. And you wouldn't think in his tender years he had had time to go to welding school, but he has, and he is. Wes and Terry are going back to Cambodia here in the very near future, and they're trying to recruit Tyler to go with them. Is that a done deal yet or not? He thinks it's a done deal, and they've come up with an idea that I just think is outstanding. It's certainly biblical. Most of those young men who are in the preaching school there in Siem Reap, Cambodia, they go back out to these villages and they do not have a source of income. And so Wes and Tyler are discussing the possibility of Tyler giving some instructions on how to weld to those young men while he's over there with them, so that they could take that skill back with them then out to their village out there. And I just think that's a tremendous idea. Wes and Terry are going to also do something a little different when they go the next trip, but I'm going to wait on that and share that with you a little bit later as to what that is. But I remember years ago, and I haven't read about it in some time, I think it was in Africa, some brother in the Brotherhood had some expertise in well drilling. Do you remember that? And he drilled probably dozens, if not hundreds, of wells around some of these African communities. And in many places, the church is quite strong in Africa as a result of that. So we hope and pray for something like that for Tyler as they go back to Cambodia again.
I'll stand and sing number 732. Sing the first verse of number 732.